For as long as humans have been able to close their eyes and imagine, we've carried a strange, stubborn belief that the self is not trapped inside the body, but merely visiting it, as if the flesh were a temporary address and consciousness were the tenant who might float out at any moment. Every culture, from deserts to mountains to isolated islands, has told stories of souls slipping loose, wandering the night, drifting across impossible distances. Before science, before telescopes, before brain scans, humans already sensed something. That awareness feels spacious, weightless, too large to be held by skin and bone. And this is where our story begins, not with the supernatural, but with the ancient human instinct to imagine the self as something fluid, luminous, untethered, something that could lift away. The Egyptians believed you had a car, a subtle duplicate that rose from your sleeping body and walked the world like a second shadow. Entire temples were built around the idea that the soul could leave the body nightly, pushed by dreams or divine winds. Thousand-year-old papyri describe the car gliding through the air, visiting distant cities, returning before sunrise. They didn't call it astral projection, but the feeling was the same, the quiet conviction that I is not the same as the body that sleeps. Far across the world, the Tibetan tradition spoke of dream walking, a consciousness so flexible that it could step out of the physical shell during deep dreaming and observe other realms. They didn't describe it in terms of neurons or REM cycles. They described it as training the mind to notice itself beyond the physical surface, like looking at your reflection in water and realizing the reflection might move before you do. For them, leaving the body wasn't a trick, it was a kind of spiritual literacy. Even the Greeks, who gave us logic and mathematics, whispered about souche, the breath that leaves the body in sleep, drifting into subtle spaces between earth and sky. Plato wrote about the soul as a winged thing, heavier than air but lighter than bone, slipping away when the senses quiet down. He described dreams not as illusions but as journeys, destinations your waking self couldn't reach. Jump ahead thousands of years and the belief remains, repackaged, renamed, but essentially unchanged. Modern people talk about astral projection the way ancient people spoke of night-traveling souls. The vocabulary shifts, the longing does not. And that longing might be the real doorway into understanding why humans across time believed in leaving the body. Because consciousness feels bigger than the body. Not scientifically, emotionally, intuitively, experientially bigger. After all, think about it. Your thoughts have no weight, your imagination has no boundary. Your dreams stretch out into landscapes that don't exist on Earth. Your fears tower over you like giants. Your hopes melt distance like sunlight. If you close your eyes right now, you can picture yourself on another continent instantly without moving an inch. You can remember a childhood bedroom as if you're standing inside it. You can imagine soaring through clouds or drifting in space, and the mind will render it so vividly that your heart might skip a beat. Humans never needed the supernatural to imagine leaving the body. We only needed the mind's enormous canvas. And yet there is something deeper, stranger, more universal beneath all these beliefs. The sense that the body is not the true center of experience. When you're frightened, your awareness jumps outside your body, watching from a distance. When you're absorbed in something, your sense of self shrinks, like your body disappears. When you sleep, the body becomes irrelevant as the dream self takes over. The boundary between me and not me has always been porous, shifting, unstable. Perhaps that's why ancient cultures didn't treat out-of-body travel as an anomaly. They treated the body as the anomaly, a brief physical stop in a larger ocean of awareness. To them, the body wasn't a prison, it was a temporary anchor, something consciousness could loosen when the lights dimmed and the world quieted down. But beneath myth and metaphor lies a psychological truth. Humans have always tried to describe the feeling of being in a body, and that feeling is weird. It's strange to wake up every morning in the same shell and call it me. It's strange that you can't see your own face without a mirror. It's strange that you never actually see your own eyes, only their reflection. It's strange that your mind can think about itself as if it was someone else. This strangeness creates a natural crack in the idea of I am this body, a crack where stories of souls escaping begin to grow. Consider the dreams where you fly, lifting off the ground with ease no physical body can replicate. Consider the dreams where you watch yourself from above, moving through hallways like a ghost, observing your own life. Consider the sleep where you drift in vast, glowing spaces that feel more real than waking reality. Every dream is a quiet rebellion against physical limits. Every dream is a small act of escape. And then there is that ancient, universal moment. The feeling of falling as you drift into sleep. That sudden drop, that electric jolt that snaps you awake. It's as if the mind momentarily lets go of the body and then panics. Wait, don't leave yet. The body jerks, like pulling a runaway horse back toward the stable. Cultures around the world interpreted this as the soul trying to escape before sleep fully captures it. Today we call it a hypnic jerk, but the feeling, the sense of slipping out of the physical shell, is older than language. Every civilization took these sensations, dreaming, floating, falling, observing, expanding, and crafted them into stories. Because humans don't just have experiences, we tell stories about them. And when experiences feel too big for the physical body, the stories become bigger too. Astral projection, in its oldest form, wasn't about traveling to other dimensions. It was about understanding this one. It was about explaining why consciousness feels so airy, so untouchable, so uncontainable. Why your thoughts can escape any room, any circumstance, why the mind can create worlds that obey no physical law. The real phenomenon behind astral projection isn't the soul leaving the body, it's the body never being able to fully contain the soul in the first place. But let's step back into history again, because when you zoom out, you notice a pattern. The stories of out-of-body travel always appear where humans question identity. Who am I when my eyes are closed? Who am I in dreams? Who am I when memory shifts, when emotion takes over, when imagination pulls me into landscapes I've never seen? Who am I when I'm not looking at my body at all? These questions create psychological tension, and astral projection becomes a metaphor that relieves that tension. It tells us the body is not the whole story. You are not trapped, you are not limited, you are not merely physical. That is why these myths persisted. They gave people permission to feel bigger than their circumstances. A slave in ancient Egypt, a monk in Tibet, a soldier in Greece, all dreamed of escaping the body, not for supernatural adventure, but for emotional survival. The concept of the traveling soul was not just metaphysics, it was hope. And then came modernity, electricity, science, the age of the brain. Suddenly the soul became the mind, and the mind became the brain, and the brain was treated like a machine, a closed system, locked in bone, firing impulses like sparks in a wire. In this worldview, consciousness was compressed into biology, squeezed down until it fit inside the skull. The ancient expansiveness was replaced with neurology. The limitless sky became a 3-pound organ, but the feeling, the instinct, never went away. People still felt themselves expand in dreams, still felt detached when overwhelmed, still experienced phantom limbs, floating sensations, dream flights. The mind kept generating experiences bigger than the body, even when the theories no longer allowed it. And so modern people reinvented ancient ideas with new language. They called it astral projection. They described silver cords, higher dimensions, vibrational shifts, metaphors dressed in scientific costume. What remains consistent across all eras is not the mechanics, not the explanations, not the beliefs, but the core experience, the mind feeling too large for the body that holds it. And maybe that's why astral projection is so alluring, because it speaks to a human longing that is older than civilization itself, the desire to escape gravity, identity, and limitation. The desire to float free, even if only in imagination. The desire to discover that me is not the same as the body that carries me. This part of the video doesn't claim that astral projection is real or unreal. It simply asks a deeper question. Why does consciousness feel like something that could leave the body at all? Because that feeling, that ancient cross-cultural intuition, tells us something profound about the human mind. It experiences itself as a traveller. It experiences the body as a place. And the journey, whether mythical or psychological, begins long before sleep. For a moment, forget the ancient stories, the floating souls, the spiritual diagrams. Forget the mythic wings and silver cords. Imagine instead a quiet room, a darkened brain scanner humming softly, and a person lying still inside. Someone who will soon experience an out-of-body sensation not through magic, but through the mathematics of perception. In this sterile, fluorescent-lit environment with electrodes like tiny stars on the scalp, scientists discovered something remarkable. The sense of being inside a body is not fixed. It is constructed, moment by moment, by the brain. And anything the brain builds, the brain can also distort, unravel, or briefly abandon. The mysticism fades, the mystery deepens. Because, as it turns out, the human brain is less like a camera recording the world and more like a painter creating it. And one of its boldest creations is the illusion that I am here in this body. To understand how the mind produces the feeling of me, you have to imagine the brain not as a single thing, but as a council, millions of circuits negotiating constantly. Vision tells you where you are. Balance tells you how you're tilted. Touch tells you where your limbs begin and end. Inner sensations tell you your heart is beating and your lungs are expanding. All of this information blends together into something called the body schema, your internal map of your physical identity. It feels automatic, effortless, unquestionable. But this map can be redrawn in seconds under the right conditions, and when it shifts, your sense of self moves with it. The most famous illustration of this is absurdly simple: the rubber hand illusion. A person sits with their real hand hidden from view while a rubber hand is placed in front of them. When both the fake hand and the hidden real hand are stroked in perfect synchrony, something shocking happens. The brain adopts the rubber hand as its own. The person gasps when the rubber hand is threatened. They feel the touch, even though the nerves in that rubber hand do not exist. Why? Because the brain isn't loyal to biology, it's loyal to patterns. When the timing of vision and touch align, the brain rewrites the boundary of the body, and if it can expand that boundary to include a rubber hand, it can also contract or dissolve that boundary altogether under stranger conditions. This is where out-of-body sensations begin to take shape, not as supernatural journeys, but as the brain struggling to maintain a coherent sense of where you are. The brain is constantly performing three tasks: tracking the body, tracking the world, keeping the two aligned. But in states like near sleep, deep fatigue, dissociation, extreme stress, and especially dreamlike transitions, these systems can drift apart. Imagine a conductor whose orchestra begins slipping out of rhythm, the violin of vision, the drum of touch, the subtle flute of balance. When they fall out of sync, your sense of location becomes unstable, and when the brain cannot anchor you to the body, it does something extraordinary. It projects you elsewhere. Out-of-body experiences often begin with sensory mismatch. The brain receives signals that don't quite align: a delay in touch, a conflict between balance and vision, a drifting of the body map during the transition between waking and REM sleep. In these moments, the brain becomes like a pilot flying through fog. With no reliable signals, it creates its own model, and that model can place you anywhere, above your body, beside it, floating in the room, or looking down from the ceiling. The mind is not hallucinating a new self. It is simply relocating the center of awareness because the physical signals are unclear. This is why many people report floating. The brain loses track of gravity for a moment. It feels no pressure on the skin, no alignment from the inner ear, no stable ground beneath the feet. So it creates the sensation of suspension, sometimes gently. Sometimes gently, sometimes violently, sometimes with the eerie clarity that dreams provide. To the person experiencing it, it feels like the soul lifting out. To neuroscience, it is the body map glitching, correcting, shifting. Consider sleep paralysis, a state where the body is frozen by REM atonia while the mind partially wakes. In this strange borderland, the brain is conscious enough to observe the world but still disconnected from the system that tells it where the body is. With the movement signals silenced, the body becomes silent too. You cannot feel your limbs, you cannot feel your chest. The self floats because there is nothing anchoring it, and in that floating the mind reaches for explanations, ancient, emotional, symbolic. But beneath the symbolism lies a quiet neurological truth. The brain momentarily lost the body. Even during normal dreams, the body schema becomes fluid. Sometimes you move through dream worlds without walking. Sometimes you fly without wings. Sometimes you watch yourself like a character in a film. These are not supernatural events. They are the brain running its simulation engine without the constraints of physical sensation. The dream world is not created outside you. It is created without the need for you to be inside a body. And so the sense of self drifts, stretches, multiplies, or dissolves. Scientists studying these states sometimes describe consciousness as a location assignment problem. In waking life, the brain assigns you to the physical body, but in transitional states, between sleep and wake, between focus and drifting, between sensory coherence and sensory chaos, that assignment can flicker. When it flickers, the location of the self becomes negotiable, and when it becomes negotiable, the mind experiences itself in motion. Not physical motion, perceptual motion. But the most astonishing part is this: the brain does not simply generate out-of-body sensations when things go wrong. It generates them because the sense of embodied selfhood is not a stable fact. It is a fragile synthesis, a creative act, a balancing act, a guess the brain keeps refining. Think about how strange it is that you never actually see your whole body at once. You see fragments, a hand, a knee, the edges of your nose. The rest of your body is inferred. The feeling that my body is here is a constructed certainty, not an observed one. And so it can be manipulated, it can loosen, it can drift. The brain is good at creating the illusion of solidity, but illusions, even convincing ones, have seams. This is also why out-of-body sensations can happen during exhaustion, dehydration, high stress, or sensory deprivation. In these moments, the body's signals become faint. The brain, deprived of strong input, begins filling in gaps with internal models. Sometimes it fortifies the sense of self, sometimes it dislodges it. A person under severe stress might describe watching themselves from the outside, not because the soul escaped, but because the brain shifted into a protective perspective, pulling the self away from the intensity of the moment as a coping strategy hardwired through evolution. In rare neurological cases, damage to specific regions, especially the temporoparietal junction, can produce full out-of-body experiences. The person sees themselves from above, even though their eyes remain closed. In brain scans, the electrical storm is clear. The area responsible for synchronizing vision, touch, and spatial awareness misfires. The result is not an illusion of the body leaving, but a shift in the coordinate system the brain uses to define self. And yet, despite the science, the experience remains emotionally powerful, because the brain does not merely compute information, it interprets it. When the brain mislocates the self, the mind interprets it through symbols, floating, rising, drifting. The sensation feels bigger than biology, because consciousness naturally tells stories about itself. The narrative of leaving the body is the mind's attempt to translate a neurological glitch into meaning, like lightning interpreted as a god, like wind interpreted as a spirit, like dreams interpreted as journeys. But here lies a deeper point, one that connects science back to the ancient myths. Even when we know the mechanics, the experience is no less profound. Because the sense of self is the most intimate thing we have. And when it moves, even slightly, even for a moment, the world feels larger, stranger, more mysterious. The ancient Egyptians didn't have brain scans, but they felt the same shift. The Tibetan monks didn't map neurons, but they noticed the same boundary dissolve. The Greeks didn't study the temporoparietal junction, but they sensed the same drifting.